Who hits go live and then isn't on camera?
I
This
wonder
guy.
about that. You said you're going to hit go live and you get up. I'm like, I'm sure that says we're live. That's interesting.
Hey, I see two people live watching right now. If you could please let us know how that audio sounds, give us a thumbs up, a thumbs down. It would be greatly appreciated. Already, I see a few names in the chat. A couple of Adam Makes Beer All-Stars in here. We got
Nice.
Paul Bond-I. Okay, now listen, I just recently learned how to appropriately, I believe, pronounce that. So, and then also a shout out to Tim, new member of the channel. Jeffrey has given us the thumbs up on audio. So let's jump right in.
Yeah.
Welcome to the October Industry Pro interview. Today, we're going to be talking with Drew Barnes, VP at Blichmann Engineering. This is episode 17 of the Adam Makes Beer podcast. I'm your host, Adam Mills. Check out Spotify, Apple Podcast, and see all the long-form brewer interviews we've done. Anything from these interviews, the monthly live stream Q&As you can find on there as well. There's a ton of stuff. Give that stuff a follow and a review because it helps a lot. Also, if you are new to the channel or podcast, go to Adam Makes Beer on YouTube. Click the playlist tab and see tons of info, brew days, techniques, tutorials. Now over 400 videos over there. As always, if you are getting value out of this content, please follow, rate, like, comment, and share with your brewing friends and craft beer enthusiasts. Shout out to Tim, who I'm just seeing in the chat, who just became a member to the Adam Makes Beer YouTube page. He did that by signing up for a monthly donation of $2.99. If you have the extra scratch and are appreciating the content that we are producing here, that's greatly appreciated. And if you don't, it is absolutely not a problem. Just keep listening. Also, I'm excited to announce that I will be a guest on the Mo Head Y'all podcast, as well as the Beersmith podcast later this month. I'm recording with Brad over at Beersmith this Saturday, and then the next weekend on the Mo Head Y'all podcast, talking craft beer. Follow them on social, and you'll be able to see when the episode drops. Keep an eye on my Instagram, and I'll let you know when they are available as well. Just a brief catch up on how things are going at the new job over at Sonder. It is proving both challenging and rewarding. I've been fully focused on getting signed off on running the brew house. It's larger than any brew house I've worked on before. It's a 3-vessel, 30-barrel automated system. I've talked about it before on the channel, but sometimes when I've trained people that have no experience in the industry, sometimes they almost seem to learn it a little faster, the actual nuts and bolts of the brew day. It's because I have all this noise in the back of my head trying to translate things, on top of the fact that I'm going into and using metric, a host of other things. But it's been really great diving into that brew house and getting that stuff figured out. I turned my last 4 work days, or tomorrow, counting my last 4 work days, I will have produced 240 barrels of IPA, which is probably 1/5 of the beer that I would normally be making in a year at other jobs. So cool stuff. But speaking of brew houses, you see it over my left shoulder. Maybe you're right. I don't know. Let's talk about our amazing sponsor at Blichmann. Blichmann Engineering has been the pioneer of nano brewing, and they have helped hundreds of successful breweries achieve their dreams since they started with 1-barrel systems in 2006. Now offering a full suite of brew houses up to 15-barrel skidded and insulated, matching cellaring equipment, keg washers, grain mills, and more, sized specifically for the nano brewer. Blichmann Pro brewing systems are competitively priced without sacrificing quality, and the simple design and factory direct support from our brewing experts gets you up and running faster than anything else on the market. When you're ready to go pro or just kicking the tires, be sure to reach out to them for expert advice and a partner to help you through it all. Turn your dreams into a reality by reaching out to Phil, Tom, or Josh at probrewing@blichmannengineering.com. Again, that's probrewing@blichmannengineering.com. Blichmann Engineering Pro Brewing is proud to be the equipment sponsor for this channel and is committed to helping every brewer, no matter where they are in their journey. Drew Barnes, how you doing?
I'm good. That was quite the intro there. All that stuff going on. I'm not used to hearing that sort of thing at work every day, man.
Well, I'm getting a little more used to it, and it is funny to see earlier videos and then more recent ones. Yeah, I am getting a little bit more used to it. In the back of my head, I always have this conversation with my one brewing friend where he talked about he did a radio spot. He's won tons of awards and whatever, and so local radio wanted to have him on, and he was talking to the radio host before they were live, and it was just normal conversation like this. Yeah. And then as soon as they went live, the radio guy was like, "And welcome back." And so I'm always worried, like, I don't want to be like super monotone and stuff, but you actually want to sound like you are, like, I'm excited to be here doing what I'm doing, right? So it's always a fine line. And every time I do that live read, I have his voice in the back of my head, making me wonder if I sound like that crazy DJ guy. But yeah.
Well, and you know what? This is so different too, because you can't see your whole audience. It's nice to have a conversation with you, but I've done some of those events where you're speaking for a half hour, an hour on different topics, and you can see the chat. But I, in a former job, was a trainer, and so I had a different class every week, and so you really dove into presentation skills.
Sure.
But a lot of that is you feed on the audience. You see them, you see how they react. And so this whole web deal, it's a different ball game, man. The first one I did, I got done. I'm like, I felt like that was horrible. I couldn't read the crowd. I had no idea what they were thinking,
Sure. Do you find yourself to be an extroverted person?
No, nope.
that surprises me, though. That surprises me because we've interacted several times in the past, and you definitely well, yeah, you seem to nail it, though.
So I think what I learned, in that job, we went into, so I've got a lot of background. I was fortunate at that company, big into leadership training, that kind of stuff. And I've carried some of that forward to Blichmann. But we dove into personality profiles. And so what I learned about myself, very analytical, very steady. Mm-hmm. And in that job, it was the opposite of what my personality was suited for. Sure. So I had to work hard at that. But what you find is at the end of the day, so if you're really extroverted and you're presenting to a group of people every day, all day, you love it and it energizes you. I see that in John. When John speaks in front of a group, he just loves it. I'm guessing you're the same way, when man. You just eat it up. I'm the opposite. I get to the end of the day, I'm exhausted. I just want to go to my room and not talk to anybody.
Dude, they're usually after I do a live stream, I am so wired. I can't go to bed for hours. And I used to schedule these later. Like sometimes I would start them at 9 or whatever, or like I've done some guys' podcasts at 9, and even like when I'm doing West Coast stuff, like I've started on with somebody at like 11. And dude, I can't go to sleep until like it's the middle of the night because I get so, especially when it's like a really good back and forth. I always tell my wife, like, I feel like I can shoot fire out of my hands at the end of it. Like I'm just that I'm just that wound up, because it really is. So like when you were talking about like the personality testing and stuff, I had some pretty thorough personality testing within the last several years, and they told me that I was in the 99th percentile for extroversion. And that's, they're not wrong. So yeah, it is funny how that goes. But you mentioned a little bit of it. You kind of touched on some of this earlier, but what was kind of your path to Blichmann? How long have you been with Blichmann now?
Yeah, almost 10 years now. So okay. I kind of bounced around out of college, didn't know what I wanted to do. I think some of the best advice I got was you don't have to know what you want to do, but as you go through life, job to job, you really figure out what you don't want to do. if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
had those jobs where
Yeah.
you don't want to do that. But no, I was fortunate to work for a couple companies where leadership was really important. And so I learned a lot about myself, the people around me. And that's what I went to school for too. So it was more the business side, the people side of things. I actually didn't learn to brew until I started working at Blichmann.
Okay.
So pretty fortunate. So John it would invite me to his brewery in his basement and teach me how to brew. So at the time he was just my boss. It was cool to learn, but then once I got out in the industry, went to the shows, things like that, I realized that it was pretty cool to have kind of private brewing lessons with John Blichmann.
Right.
Or I
Right.
remember going to one of the pro shows and Brad Smith and John Palmer went to dinner with John Blichmann and I, and so we were
Yeah.
sitting there. And they start talking about hop utilization at high altitudes and all the stuff that's like way up here, man. I'm like, what is going on? I walked out of that dinner thinking, man, I'll bet there's some guys who would absolutely love this and just eat it up. And I'm just sitting there. I have no idea what these guys are talking about. I mean, low level, I do, I guess, but
Sure. Sure.
not competing with those guys. Yeah, I heard you say you're gonna talk with Brad here later this month. He's a good dude.
Yeah, man. And honestly, so I've met both Johns before, and this will be my first time talking with Brad, and just good people.
Yeah,
Good
yep.
people, man. I ran into John Palmer at Craft Brewers Conference this past year, and so I had my name tag on, but it wasn't like. So that would be the easy out that he would remember, but he remembered. I mean, he remembered that 10 years ago. He goes, "Are you still in Michigan?" And I'm like, "No, man, I'm in Cincinnati." Because he
Wow.
came out and did I collaborated with him on a water presentation when HomebrewCon was in Grand Rapids, Michigan. But that was 10 years ago. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? But
Oh,
just a nice dude, and good people.
yeah.
And you mentioned kind of that leadership piece, and
Mhm.
the leadership question to me is always interesting, because I was talking with a friend of mine, and I think everybody knows that they want to work for a good leader. They
Yeah.
want to be a good leader, and I think on some level they might even know what it takes, but they tend to be few and far between out there.
Yeah.
Like when you're filling that role of a leader well. So I'm not even going to award it to where I'm going to make you just sit here and pat yourself on the back for the next few minutes. So
Please don't.
when you're doing it well, right? Or like when
Yeah.
you've seen leadership modeled in the workplace, what are some of those things? What do you think are some of those key points to that leadership component?
So I think a big piece of this is the type of leader you want to be, and so I believe in servant leadership.
Mm,
And so you asked how I got to Blichmann. I came to Blichmann right after my first son was born. I believe he was a couple months old, and what drew me to Blichmann was family. Family comes first. So
mhm.
I remember within a month of me starting at Blichmann, we had a lady that worked for us actually fell into a fire,
Oh, wow.
and got burnt really bad. She was out like a month and a half. And so at the time, I mean, we wanted to make sure we took care of her. So she didn't have PTO or anything like that. John paid her the whole time she was out. Your job's still going to be here, just the reassurance and making sure we take care of people, do right by people. And that carries through, even in your message when you talk about pro and helping people turn dreams into reality. I mean, it's all about helping people. We've got just an incredible team. And when I did that training, it was all about, you, you can't teach someone to care about others,
Sure.
or it's extremely difficult to do that. I would say that. So
Sure.
from a sales standpoint, that was something. When we look at the team, when we look at bringing people in, it was more about who are they as a person. Do they care
Mhm.
about the people around them? We're not there to just make a buck. We want to help people. So let me circle back to your other question about
Sure.
leadership. But I believe in servant leadership, and so you can tell if you are a good leader by the success of your whole team.
Mm,
And that's really the principle of servant leadership. If you're serving your employees, not the other way around, if you're serving them, you're doing everything you can to make them successful. And so when you see your team being successful, you see them learning, you see them growing. For example, I mentioned to you before we jumped on, my kids are on fall break. So I'm home today, home tomorrow, spending time with the kiddos, got some quality time today, which is great. I didn't get, so Friday I took off, but I was on the phone most of the day in emails. Today, didn't touch it.
Yeah.
And there's a piece there too, which is nice to disconnect a little bit, Adam. But beyond that, I can only do that because I have an incredible team at work. I know they're going to take care of things. I know they're going to make the right decisions, and so I guess I feel like being a leader is pouring into your people. And the same thing that I talked about, it's hard to train in sales. It's the same thing when you're in leadership. Are you a leader because you want to be in charge? Or are you a leader because you want to help the people around you?
Yeah.
And I think that shows up to people. I
Yeah.
truly think that shows up to people. And so I really believe in helping all my employees succeed. And so whatever they need, we do one-on-ones and talk through things and do different book clubs. And I guess the goal is just always learn and grow.
Sure.
And if I'm helping them do that, then I think I am a good leader, and it may not be that the position they're in is the perfect fit for them today, but 5-10 years from now, even if they go to some other company, they're going to be more successful there if we helped them to learn and grow while they were at Blichmann.
Sure. No,
different way to look at it, I know, but
no, I really like that a lot. You mentioned, but before I lose the thought on it, you mentioned that you do one-on-ones. How often do you do one-on-ones?
So with my direct team every week.
Okay.
So, and we just sit down and even, when we have our management meetings too, it's sit down and how can we support each other? How can we help each other? Communication is huge. And so we'll run into, day-to-day issues and little problems come up or different challenges come up, and we just find solutions and move past them. But the weekly is a good time to just sit down, reset. How are things going? Where are we at? And one of the most difficult things I think in leadership too is being willing to have the difficult, honest conversations.
Yeah, man.
I feel like I've worked for people and I've seen people where they just the elephant's in the room. You both know it. You know it's there.
Yeah.
So you might as well just bring it up, talk it through, and if you approach it in the right way, when it comes from your heart and you genuinely care about the person, it's not in a malicious, I'm blaming you, you screwed up, I'm mad type of a thing. It's hey, I care. Hey, I know this happened. What can we do to help that? The next time we run into it, it's more about learning than just playing the blame game. Now, certainly the tough part of that, Adam, is knowing when you got to draw a line too.
Yeah.
If you're seeing the same things from people over and over, that's a tough part of leadership. But people respect you if you're willing to have that conversation.
It's true. It's really true. And I think there is something to that, and something that I picked up back in my teaching days. I went to a professional development on something, and they're essentially talking about, having those accountability conversations with your students in that case, or with the people that you're responsible for on the management side. A big part of it is, removing yourself from the situation.
Right.
And then they were really pushing being very proactive with praising specific things that you see them doing in a timely manner, right? Because they're saying you need to make those deposits in order to be able to make withdrawals, right?
Yep.
So if I'm in a situation, Drew, where I need to call you out on something, there's something going on at work that isn't something the way we do, or something like that, we need to have that relationship. I actually have to build up that capital with you in order to make that. And so, but I think a big part of the key is that it can't just be like nonsense. One time I worked with a guy who there would be a disaster shift, and at the end of it, he would say, "Oh, everybody's amazing. This was amazing." And it's like, no, actually it was a disaster. And there, you know what I mean? And so
the hype man.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And there's something to being positive, right? Positivity is good, but it also has to be realistic, because everybody knows nobody wants that to happen again. Right. But yeah, and then you mentioned it too. It's having the nerve to actually have that conversation when you need to have it. and you generally need to have it sooner than maybe you want. Like,
Yeah.
right? Like if you have
Oh,
that
yeah.
feeling in your stomach where you're like, oh man, I really need to talk to this person, and you see that little window, you got to take it.
Yep.
You got
Oh,
to
yeah.
take it. Yeah.
Timing is everything. And so
Mhm.
you'll find too where people might not be in the right mindset that day. And it's
Sure.
like, if I try and have that conversation, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to
Sure.
sink in, and we're not going to have a good, honest conversation. And that's not going to do either of us any good. So
Sure.
there's times when you've got to address it right away. There's times when maybe I've got to wait a day,
Hmm.
to sit down and talk. But you're right on with the deposits, man. Every conversation, you're either building trust
Hmm.
or you're tearing down trust.
Sure.
Every interaction.
Sure.
And we don't think about it that way. But you talked about getting energized when you're on a podcast and stuff like that. When it's the same in everyday, conversations. You walk away and you feel good about a conversation, or there's times when you walk away and you're like, I really don't feel good about that one.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
and you can tear down trust. I've seen instances where I'll give you a specific example. There was a guy who performance was struggling a little bit, and it came time for a raise, and sat down and had to discuss things. And I saw this manager tell him, well, the company's not doing well this year, so you're not going to get a raise.
Sure.
The reality was his performance wasn't up to par, and
Mm.
that's why he didn't get a raise. And those are two different things. And so, if you tell him it's because the company isn't doing well, it's kind of an out for you. And then
Mhm.
you don't really have to get into a tough conversation about why the performance
Right.
isn't where you need it to be. But then how does that affect him moving forward? So when I say, you're serving your people, that's part of it.
Mhm.
You can't help him, and he's not going to learn from that interaction. And he's not going to get any better moving forward. He's going to wonder, hey, is everybody else getting raises? What's going on with the company? Are we doing better? Now I'm going to get paid more money, but
Sure.
his performance doesn't change. And the goal is really just to help him. We're all guilty of screwing up, or
Mhm.
not, not being as good as we will be 5 years from now at something.
Sure.
Although the older I get, I feel like we're going the other way sometimes. I don't really,
Yeah, man, I hear that.
but the goal is to help people grow. Just be honest and have those conversations. And I think from a leadership standpoint, that's part of communication. It's not just this is what's going on with the company, or setting the expectations. It's being able to have those honest conversations in a timely manner when the time is right. And that helps out a ton. So,
Absolutely.
but
Absolutely.
I guess I said too, I'm not an extrovert. So having those conversations definitely wear me out, but I do enjoy them for what it's worth. It's probably an anxiety thing I've dove into a
Sure.
little bit more lately. And it's more the anxiety of having to talk to a bunch of people. When I
Yeah.
have the interaction, I actually do enjoy it.
But
So
even as an extrovert, man, I don't enjoy those conversations
yeah,
because
no,
there's always
no.
that, and because I'm somebody, I like to make people comfortable. I'm a little bit of a
Uh,
people pleaser, right?
yeah,
And so
yeah.
that stuff can get tricky. How familiar are you at all with Simon Sinek? He did a TED, one of the bigger TED talks. I think one of the all-time top ones, and he did it on like, what is your why?
Mm, yeah.
And it's worth checking out if you
Okay.
haven't. And he talks about basically, all companies know how and what and how they're making it. Not all
Yeah.
companies understand why they're
Yeah.
making it. And he said that's, some of the difference between, being great and not.
Yeah.
And when having the conversation of kind of figuring out what your why is, he
Mhm.
asked the question, when you're walking out the door at the end of the day from work, and you said, man, I would have done that for free. Now this is, roughly,
Right,
you
right, right.
understand. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of, but what's that thing for you that is just like, man, it's just the favorite part of what you do. That's like it feels like I'm ripping somebody off by getting paid.
um, So I think it is dealing with the people. It is helping people. Like I love the leadership style or side of things where I can just have those conversations and really, I guess, watching my team grow. And I know that seems crazy, but so we've got on the wall. So the Simon Sinek, the one you just mentioned, we actually watched that about a week ago in our management meeting. One of the
Okay.
guys brought it up, specifically that clip. I believe he was talking about Apple was his example,
Hmm.
and so they start with the why and then move out from there.
Hmm.
And it was really cool. I've not seen that entire TED talk. I need to watch it. Um, but watching even my management team bring up different videos, they start diving into more of that leadership because they want to learn and grow. And I enjoy that, man.
Mhm.
So it's been a switch. So when I was in pro brewing, I was handling the quoting and a lot of the technical support, helping develop some of the products in production. It was making sure my team got everything built, shipped out the door. We did it correctly. We did it quickly. Um, Vice president, a little bit different. And so
Sure.
you don't have, I get to the end of the day and I feel like at 5 o'clock is when I start diving into my emails and my work,
Sure.
because from 8 to 5, it's more about the team. What
Mhm.
can I do to help them throughout their day? And that's the side I enjoy the most.
Mhm.
At first, it was a little bit of a struggle because I didn't know, I walk out the door and it's like, what did I actually accomplish? It's kind of like, I go outside and cut up a tree, get the chainsaw out. We had a tree fall and you got to cut it up, right? Well,
Sure.
you get done, you feel good about it. Man, look what I just accomplished. I got this all done. It's good hard work. When you get in a position like this, it's a completely different thing. I'm not getting my hands dirty like that. There's no
Sure.
tangible thing sitting in front of me. It's more about really having the conversations with everybody. And I think that's what I enjoy. As much as I say that exhausts me, Adam, to have
Sure.
a lot of those conversations. Uh, I enjoy it, man. Lately I've been seeing a lot of people in the organization come up with different processes, different systems, different ways to do things, to solve problems that over time we've had. And it's all about quality. Um, so on our wall, we have a little saying that says integrity in all we do,
Mhm.
um, at Blichmann. And so it helps when we go to make a decision to know what is the right decision, and not just for us, what's the right decision for the customer? What's the right decision for the employee? And so there are a lot of times where I'll just stop and we just look up at the wall.
Mhm.
What's the right thing to do? Because it's not always the dollars and cents decision. I will say
Sure.
that.
Sure.
Um, but that's what I enjoy. I enjoy working with my people. And I think too, probably my favorite moment working at Blichmann. We went to Indiana Brewers Cup one year,
Mhm.
and it was a lot of brewers that I had helped with from the equipment side get started. And so I was sitting at one of their tables, and he won. One of the guys had worked on this cream ale for like 10 years, and then he became the head brewer at this little brew pub in town, and he won a gold medal for that cream ale. He
Yeah.
got up on his chair and was so excited, man. He was right next to me. It was the coolest moment. And we got done with that whole competition. We stood up in front and got pictures with all the different breweries who used our equipment. It was so rewarding, man, to see
Yeah.
see how you can help people. And
Yeah.
because it's easy to get caught up in the day to day and, oh,
Sure.
here's another order and we got to take care of this. And
Sure.
but to actually be there and experience some of their success with them.
Sure.
Coolest thing, man. That was one of the moments where I definitely was like, how am I getting paid to do this?
Right. Right.
It was awesome.
Absolutely.
It was
And
awesome.
it kind of segues well into this next question
Yeah.
of, what are some of, you talked about these places that you've worked with, these newer
Mhm.
places. What are some of the mistakes that people make on the equipment side when they're starting out or
Yeah.
expanding?
Yeah. So I would say anybody starting a brewery, and they're people where you're like, man, I know they're going to do well, but um, let's be open minded. And I say that because with Blichmann, we've been on the homebrew side for over 20 years now,
Mhm.
and so we have a lot of homebrewers who are starting their own breweries, which is awesome. In fact, that's really how we got on the pro side. We just had so many requests, people that wanted us to make that larger equipment.
Sure.
And so the mistakes I see people make, size of the equipment is a big one. And what you'll find is a lot of, we're in a weird niche. So caveats apply here, Adam. I'm just
Sure.
going to get
Sure.
that out of the way
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
front.
Yeah.
We specialize in smaller equipment. And what we found is a lot of the other equipment manufacturers, if they can sell a 30 barrel and that's a $400,000, equipment sale, they don't want to mess with a 3 barrel that's a $50,000 sale because they're going to end up putting about the same amount of work and effort into it. So why pick the $50,000 sale? They don't want that. And so when I go to we used to go to NanoCon when it was in person, now I know it's online, and you sit down with some of these breweries who are getting ready to start up. They're trying to figure out what size equipment. Everybody tells them buy as big as you can afford, buy the biggest equipment you can
Sure.
afford. Well, the reality is it really depends on your business model. And what I see is people get very fixated when they come into this with how they want to do things. And so I think being open minded is the biggest one because you need to listen to your customers. You're brewing what they want to drink, not what you want to drink, which
Mhm.
is a big difference.
Mhm.
And when you're looking at your sizing of equipment, really evaluate, what is my client base? What am I after? How many turns do I want to do every single week? And how many beers do I want to have on tap? You want something new and fresh in your brewery. When you're brewing on a 30 barrel, I imagine that's a little tougher, Adam. I
Yeah.
don't,
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
don't, I
Yeah.
mean, I have no
Yeah.
idea how many barrels of beer you guys go through, but when I see people oversize equipment, you'll talk to people who brew once every 2 weeks.
Mhm.
Well, your equipment's not the right size then,
Mhm.
you know?
Absolutely.
Or
Absolutely.
we get a lot of people, and everybody has their different styles, but we get a lot of people who, when they go into brewing, it's not a hobby anymore.
Mhm.
And what you do in a 5-gallon system at home is not the way you brew on the big system,
Sure.
because your objective is different at
Sure.
that point, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we get people who, they want to do step mashing, they want to do, all kinds of different things at the pro level. And when the volume's larger, it's not that it's not feasible. It just takes significantly longer to do some of those things.
Sure.
And when it becomes a job, I don't, it's important to enjoy what you do, but I
Mhm.
don't know a lot of people, Adam, who say, man, I wish I could spend another hour or two at work every day. You
Sure.
know,
Those hours stack up, man. I remember
they
when
do in a hurry.
I started at Cartridge, it was a used specific mechanical, and they
Yeah.
bought it from a German chain pub
Mhm.
place that had shut down. And listen, it's a great system. It was great equipment.
Yeah.
I really liked their stuff, but it was set up to mash into the kettle and then pump that mash over the lauter ton, right?
Ah, yep.
And I say, hey, listen, I need you to cut a hole in that lauter ton, and I'm gonna be doing, and I'm not mashing into the kettle because you know what I mean. And
Oh,
especially
yeah.
especially at a point where, okay, so I'm working for that company. I do not own that company.
Mhm.
I don't. If I'm brewing 150 times a year, those
Yep.
hours start adding up. An hour and a half to 2 hours every time I do that. Next thing you know,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
spending a lot less time at home than you want to be. And so yeah, I think that's an interesting angle on it for
Yeah.
sure.
And I'm sure you and Brad Smith might get into this, but I mean, um, we've come a long way in the brewing world, from like how grains are modified, and I mean all that whole side of things. But a lot of the brewing practices that you practice as a hobbyist were based on things from a long time ago
Mhm,
that now necessarily aren't the case.
mhm,
And so the same thing is true at a brew pub as it is making equipment.
mhm,
So we have to listen to our customers and make what they want.
mhm.
And what we can't afford to do is make what we want the way we want
Sure,
all the time.
sure.
It's got to be about, what does your customer want? And so it's the same when you go to make beer. When you took that extra hour and a half to 2 hours of brew day, Adam, are they going to taste the difference?
That's the question,
You
right?
know, and
That's
and
the
it's
question.
and it's the $1,000,000 question, and I
Mhm,
see so many guys really struggle with that when they're looking to go pro. Is they want to do it exactly like they did on their 5-gallon setup, and
mhm,
and sometimes you can, but sometimes you'll find it's really not beneficial. So I say, have an open mind,
mhm,
and not only listen to what your customers want to drink, but then quality. I used to go to one of the local breweries every Friday, and there's a couple brewers would meet me there, and we just drink a few beers. Whatever they
mhm.
were working on that week, they'd bring. We do some tastings, give each other feedback. It was the coolest thing, and they were both very open-minded. They very
Sure.
much wanted to get better at their craft, and that's how they went after it. I get a lot of people who want to start a brew pub, but the focus is so much on, here's how I've done it. The people that were drinking my beer really liked it, so I've got
Mhm.
to keep doing it that way. And they don't want to hear their beer's not good.
Sure.
And it's not a matter of telling somebody. It goes back to the leadership part where we talked about having those honest conversations. They're important, but you also have to have the right people who are willing to receive on the other end. They're willing to actually hear out that conversation, uh,
Sure.
to learn from it, because the goal is to make better beer, man. I mean, that's
Mhm,
really the goal,
mhm,
and that feedback is incredibly important. So when I see places struggle, they go into it with a mindset of, I'm going to do it the way I did it at home. I'm going to make the beer I want to make.
mhm.
And they don't want the feedback. If somebody tells them their beer's not good, they don't want to hear it. And it's, um, it's unfortunate, I don't know how else to say that.
Yeah.
It's tough to get through to those people sometimes, and it's like, man, I know you've got it in you to make really awesome beer. A little feedback can make all the difference in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So anyway, I hope that
No,
answers your question, man.
no, definitely, definitely. I think that's and one of the things that you mentioned is, places like Founders, places like Stone, they've had kind of that mantra, and it's not necessarily a marketing thing, even though it has been spun in that direction. They'll say,
Yeah,
we make the beer we want to drink. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
And there's something to be said for that. But
right,
then again, we're also talking about places that have been in the industry for a very long
right,
time. When they were making beer that they wanted to drink, there was far less competition.
yeah,
It was a completely different environment, right? Now, I'm not saying that you can't go out there and be bold and everything like that, but you do have to know, especially if you are looking at moving beer through a pub, all right,
right.
like most people are. I I bet, probably the lightest beer you make is one of the best beers that one of your top sellers, right?
That was the one that was just coming to mind too.
And dude,
Yeah.
you have to be able to get excited about that beer. For
Yep.
me at Cartridge, it was Cartucho, our Mexican
Mhm.
lager and adjunct lager. And it was our litmus test for how good was our process.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It was the primary medium for making for making changes, whether it be with water chemistry, different things, because all those things are going to show in that beer, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
if you're not excited about that beer, get excited about it, because you can probably sell a lot of it and it
Yep.
can make you a much better brewer. Right now, you can still do all of the other things, right? But
Oh yeah.
sometimes those beers that are going to end up being really good volume beers for you, that maybe aren't as exciting for you, you have to figure out ways to make them a little bit more exciting, because they do help to pay the bills.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. A lot of times those are some of the more profitable beers to make. You don't have
Hmm.
as much money in the beer, and but people want to drink it. And so I've seen a lot of breweries, they don't want to make the hazy IPA. They don't want to make a light lager. And if
Hmm.
they start doing it, all of a sudden the light lager's 45% of their volume, and then they have to start talking about larger equipment because so many people want to drink it.
Hmm.
Um, so it's always fun to watch that. And I don't know why, I guess I'll also say this: beer drinkers. So when you go to breweries or you tell people you're in the beer industry,
Hmm.
you've been dealing with this for a long time, Adam, right?
Sure,
You,
sure.
you get a range of responses, but you get those guys who are the beer snob, and I think from when you deal with enough professional brewers, you learn a lot, right?
Hmm.
And one of the things I learned was you see the guys who come out and, well, I only drink IPAs. I don't drink that light lager crap. That's
Sure.
swill. And they get all this attitude. And it's like, all right, so on the knowledge of beer, you're probably here. Because as you keep learning, and that's what people are so surprised, that light lager that Miller Lite, Bud Light, Coors Light is making, that is tough to make, man.
Yeah, man.
You can't make a
Absolutely.
mistake or they're gonna
Absolutely.
taste it. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
gonna show up like a sore thumb. But then you give them like the history of the IPA and how easy it is to cover up off flavors in a beer like that by comparison to like a light lager.
Sure.
But those are fun conversations to have too. I mean, you get a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, increasingly, I remember when I first got into the industry, I started to be more and more surprised when, so one of the things that Michigan does really well
Mhm.
is their Brewers Guild puts on some of the best beer festivals that I've ever been a part of. The Michigan Brewers Guild, summer, winter, fall, those people from Michigan are crazy. They'll go out when it's 0 degrees. One year we
Yeah,
had, and they'll put, and I mean, and I don't know what the numbers are today, but they'll put
yeah.
6,000 people through those places in a day, man. And
Whew.
and I remember they dropped the kegs off to our booth and the beers froze, right? So we had beers freeze. So it gets cold and people are
Yeah,
crazy. But yeah, uh, oh, oh yes, but at those festivals,
Yeah.
afterwards, a lot of times I would see brewers going back and like popping open like cans of hams or
Oh
I
yeah.
mean everybody
Oh
has
yeah.
their
Yep.
favorite light
Yep.
ultra light lager, right?
Yep.
And it's one of those things and now what you're seeing is you're starting to see these brewers actually making these light beers,
Right.
right? Because there is demand for it.
Yep.
And obviously as I mentioned before, it's kind of a bit of a proving ground as well too, right? Because I know like the
Yep.
first time that they'll do like a rubber boot society thing where industry folks will hit a different brewery every month. And most people, when they came to when I was at Cartridge, most people got the Hellas because that was the lightest
Okay.
thing on
Right.
the menu at that point. I didn't have the Mexican lager up. And so everybody had the Hellas, and then they started drinking IPA and whatever. But everybody wants to see what that light beer is actually all about, right?
Yeah.
And that's how when I go into a new place, that's the beer that I want to be tasting too, because it does let me technically know what's going on with the brew house.
Oh yeah.
For sure.
Yep.
For sure.
And even from a clarity standpoint, too, you get some of those beers and it's like, I'm not sure this beer looks quite the way it should.
Absolutely. So you mentioned a little bit before that, I mean, listen, I remember when I learned the majority of what I know about brewing. Like I have a hard time putting a percentage on it, but it's like all the nuts and bolts, all my fundamentals. I learned from listening to the Brewing Network podcast, starting back in the early 2000s when they first started popping off. And that was, they would have big time pros on just talking about everything. So they would have Vince Chilurzo on. They'd have Jeremy Marshall from Lagunitas. They'd have Matt Brendelson from Firestone Walker. They've had all these amazing guys. Then all these really top homebrewers as well. Super successful people. And that's really where I learned most of, the fundamentals of what I know about brewing right now. And it was back then. That was the first time that I had heard about Blichmann stuff, because Blichmann was sponsoring, and I believe still sponsors, Brewing Network content.
Yeah.
To this day. So as you mentioned before, like most people know that there's the home brewing component. Are people surprised that you offer pro size equipment now?
Oh yeah.
For sure.
That's always funny. Well, everybody, that's how we started. And honestly, it's the reason we started doing pro equipment. People just ask for it, but we've been in the homebrew business for so long and they just have no idea. So we meet them and start talking and, oh yeah, you guys make homebrew equipment. We're like, well, we make some bigger equipment too. Oh, really? Yeah. We started making pro equipment. Oh, really? I mean, people are just shocked. And I think it's been at this point, probably 7 years ago, I would guess, when we started pro. So we've been doing it for a while. And so, yeah, we've always supported the Brewing Network.
Yep.
And one of the reasons, and I got to give John all the credit for this. So when he started this business, he wanted to support the industry.
Yep.
So even when I started 10 years ago, we only sold to retailers that had brick and mortar stores. Because we wanted people to be able to walk in and get that advice, have that interaction, be able to pick up their equipment there. We started having a bunch of online retailers who would just try and sell the equipment at the lowest possible price.
Sure.
And then we saw the brick and mortars get hurt. So we actually backed off from that for years and resisted. As competition came into the market, eventually we had to give in, start selling direct and selling to some online only places. Brick and mortar stores these days are kind of going away. Everybody wants to shop online. So we've had to adapt over time, but I know that same principle still applies today. Like we really want to support the industry. It's not just about selling equipment. We do that to keep the doors open.
Sure.
But we want to support the industry.
Sure. And you mentioned before we talked about equipment sizing a little bit. What is kind of the typical size that you end up selling to people? And let's kind of keep it like on the, do you have, so actually we can kind of expand it a little bit. So do you have people that want to do like full on packaging, like full on distro, or do you sell mostly to people that are opening up like pubs?
Yep. Mostly pubs, and so
Mhm.
our most popular sizes are really the 3.5 barrels are number one size,
Yep.
and then 5 barrel.
Mhm.
So those are the two most popular, and it is, somebody who's got the customer who just wants to walk in and buy a pint right there.
Yep.
And from a profitability standpoint, it makes sense. If you can sell that beer for $6
Mhm.
at the counter and you don't have to pay, to sell the 12 pack at the liquor store, you
Sure.
don't have to do the distro
Sure.
piece. When you jump into that distro piece, the sizing of your equipment vastly changes.
Mhm.
You're in that ball game. I mean,
Yeah.
you've seen
Yeah.
that, and it's completely different. So if
Yeah.
you can have that interaction, that face to face, sell the beer over the counter, a 3.5 or 5 barrel is a great system.
Do you have kind of the situation where you have people buying the 3.5 or the 5, but then they'll get some same size fermenters, but then they'll also get
Mhm.
like some double size fermenters. So some on the 5 barrel system, maybe a 10 barrel fermenter or a 7 barrel fermenter for the 3.5. Is that something that you see people doing?
Yeah, definitely. So people will go, say they buy a 3.5 barrel brew house. So there's some more that goes into this too. So I originally created a spreadsheet to help customers, and then we actually put it on our website and we call it our tank calculator.
Hmm.
But really the idea of that whole thing, Adam, was just to help people figure out A, how many tanks do I need to have?
Hmm.
Um, and B, what size? Because
Sure.
in your mind, you're sitting here thinking, okay, well, if I'm making 3.5 barrels twice a week, then my output is going to be however many 100 barrels a year.
Sure.
And but you have people that sit and think, I'm going to brew twice a week and I'm going to make 800 barrels of beer this year. And
Hmm.
that's what I need to sell. But
Hmm.
they don't actually sit down and do the math to figure out, well, if I'm only making 7 barrels a week
Hmm.
because I brew twice on a 3.5 barrel system, once I start doing the math on that, I'm only making a couple 100 barrels a year. I'm not making,
Sure.
I'm making 350 barrels a year. I'm not making 800
Sure.
barrels a year. And
Sure.
so we tried to put it in there so that people could put different parameters. If they want to put their barrel output, they can do that.
Hmm.
Put how many times you want to brew. It'll tell you what equipment size. And
Hmm.
so we have a lot of people that once you start doing that, you realize maybe it is that light lager, that your Hellas, whatever your most popular beer is.
Yep.
It is so important to have a tank that's twice the size because
Yeah.
you just don't have to. That's one brew day. Double up that day,
Yep.
fill up your tank, and then it frees up all your other smaller tanks
Sure.
because you don't want to take up multiple small tanks with the exact same beer. It
There,
really
there,
slows
there
it
is
down.
something to having some diversity in size with that as well, and like you mentioned, and just to be clear too, that lighter beer can also be, a blonde ale too.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
that's one of those things I would absolutely recommend to people that if you have limited tank space and things like that, but you want to have that light beer. I've got stuff on the channel of us making like a rice lager and stuff like that. You can make the same beer with American ale yeast, and you're going to be just fine. it's
oh
it's
yeah,
going to
yeah,
scratch the itch for your pub. You
yeah,
know what I
yep,
mean? But I think that's a really good point, and something that I didn't really wrap my head around immediately when I was in the industry, the utility of having those double sized tanks, because the reality is, you know, you can turn that you can turn that brew house a lot, right?
oh
And
yeah,
it's meant to be turned, and it's meant to be filling up tanks. And so some of the places that I've seen that have done things in a very smart fashion, even on the pub side, not just on larger distro or whatever, you'll see people with those double size fermenters,
yep,
because it helps them stay ahead. It helps them not to have to
yeah,
rush beers even as well, because it can play in on the quality standpoint as well, where it can put you in a situation where you don't have to rush a beer
yep.
because you're actually making a little bit larger size with things like that. So
And we get a lot of people too who come back to us, so they bought their 3.5 and they went with all the same size tanks or 5 barrel or whatever size it is. And then after you get going a little bit, it's like, man, I'm having to brew this beer a couple times a week.
yep.
I
Yep.
need to get that bigger tank for exactly the reason
Sure.
you said it. You're just putting too much time in brewing the same beer, taking up too much of your cellar with it.
And
You know,
you can really increase your capacity without increasing your square footage. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Because so many of those tanks are so similar in footprint. You know what I mean? Whether it's a 7-barrel tank or a 10-barrel tank or a 5, and
Yeah.
scaling those up, the footprints are pretty similar on
Yeah,
those,
you're
right?
talking the
You just tend
diameter
to go further
differences,
up. Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah. Exactly. Yeah, the
Yep.
diameter difference is very, very small. So yeah, you can swap those tanks out. And there's always, I mean, no, I shouldn't say there's always the used market as well. So you could move on from your smaller tank and then replace it with that larger. So
Yeah.
it's a good way to go. And it's one of those things where it can prevent you from overbuying up front too. It'll let you
Yeah.
kind of your brewery kind of grow with you a little bit.
And,
Because go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, I saw some people commenting too, that have our 3.5 barrel brew house, which is cool. We try to be really simple with our brew house too,
Mhm.
so that you can afford to do more. You can afford to do more on the cellaring side or in other areas of your brewery. Um, the goal is to make good quality beer. We tried to leave it or make the system very simple and actually very, I don't know what the word is, familiar. If you're used to home brewing, moving hoses, things like that on a
Sure.
smaller scale, we basically tried to take some components from other pro brew houses and from our home brew and kind of mix those. So it was not overwhelming. You
Mhm.
walk into that 30-barrel brew house, Adam, or somebody getting ready to go pro, and it's like,
That computer
what the hell is
screen
going
just
on with all this?
blaring at me,
Oh
telling me
yeah.
I'm not good enough. Wait,
Oh,
that's probably inside my head. Never mind. That's probably something else. But
man, it's a whole different ballgame and it can be
sure,
intimidating,
sure,
and so that's what we try to make things simple, but to allow people to put more of that money other places. And we've even
sure,
had a lot of people thank us, because they've dreamed of opening their own brewery, but they couldn't afford to do it.
sure.
And so we try to come in at a really affordable price to enable people to get that brewery up and going. You
And
know,
I think sometimes that's one of those things because people go through all the work to raise money to get that big loan, and then all of a sudden that money hits and it just feels like they're flush with cash and they just want
yeah,
to. But really, and I mean, it's always my advice to people. Start as lean as you can and
yes,
have as profit forward. And this is going to sound like a dumb thing to say, but be as profit forward as you can up front. Like, have that be
right,
the goal. If you want to do some things that are not as profit forward, meaning putting beer into package and selling it outside of your doors,
right,
maybe put yourself in a situation to grow into that. I've seen
yeah,
so many people overbuy equipment, overbuy tanks, brew houses, ancillary stuff. And then they can't get up from, it's one thing to have the space to, grow. But you don't have to hit the ground running boom with this whole thing, right?
yeah.
Try to put yourself in a position to where you can start making money, where you can show the bank you're profitable, where you can show investors that you're profitable, and then build from there.
And then you can afford to do some of those fun things that maybe don't make you as much money.
Absolutely. 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 So now, does Blichmann offer, because we've just really talked about kind of the brew house side of things and tanks. What are some of the other things that Blichmann offers beyond that?
So, man, I'll never forget when we started pro brewing. So I jumped into that pretty early on, like a week or two in, and it was, "Hey, Drew, we need you to jump in and help out on the pro brewing side." I was like, "Cool." Well, I've learned to brew a little bit with John in his basement, and so I know just enough to be dangerous. And I start having these conversations with people, and I'm like, "Oh man," I learned a lot. And when I started, we had fermenters, brights, and we had a brew house,
Okay.
and that was all we offered.
Hmm.
And at the time, man, it was really tough because these people are coming to me, and I mean, there were some other limitations there too, but they needed so much more.
Hmm.
They needed they needed a chiller. They needed uh, what all do we offer now? Well, now we offer keg washers.
Hmm.
We brought on a chiller company so we could recommend chillers. We
Hmm.
brought on it was kind of little things, oxygenation setups.
Hmm.
We brought on, I'm trying to think, there's so many. Um, it was all the little ancillary equipment that you don't necessarily think about.
You
And
also
so
have some newer milling equipment, I know, right?
we do
Yep.
a nice little grain mill. And people don't think about all those little things. In fact, we would have people that would get their brew house and their tanks,
Uh-huh.
and then all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, Drew, I didn't think about this, but I need a mill." I need
Sure.
a keg washer. Do you guys have these?
Sure.
No. And so then I'm just sending them everywhere else. Well, really, when you want to help the customer, it's not necessarily, I don't make a ton of money from all this stuff, but
Sure.
if they're coming to me, I want to be able to help them with everything they need,
Sure.
So it was more about trying to help them find solutions. And part of that was just vetting stuff out. I worked with a lot of local breweries to do that.
Sure.
I should have made a whole list of all the pro equipment we have. I could tell you, working with the pro guys the other day, when we do a quote, we send out a quote for the brew house and the tanks.
Hmm.
That's generally what people request.
Sure.
And then we put, recommended accessories type of thing on there
Yeah.
so that they can see all the other things we have. I can't make the assumption that, Adam, if you're in the market for brewing equipment, you're going to pour through my website and look at every single page
Sure.
to see exactly what we have to offer.
Hmm.
So the goal is just kind of show people. And that goes back to the sales piece too. I believe when you do sales and my, you mentioned, Josh and Tom and Phil earlier,
Hmm.
phenomenal guys.
Yeah.
And the goal is truly just to help whoever's on the other end of that line or the other end of that keyboard, because they've got a dream. They're trying to start a business, or their business is growing, and we
Sure.
want to be able to help them. And so you get some high pressure salespeople who just want to push everything out there because it makes them more commission. We don't do commission sales
Sure.
for that reason. But what we find is because we provide all those accessories and we just kind of show them what we have to offer, the goal is
Mhm.
just to talk to people and figure out what they need. The cool
Sure.
thing is, and it's a different way to look at sales. I will say that, Adam. But the,
Mhm.
the goal is care about the customer, figure out what they need, and then help them. Hey, we have equipment, so I can help that person. That's the cool
Sure.
part of being in this industry.
Sure.
And so the byproduct is they end up with a really nice brew house that is going to start making them money. It's affordably priced, and we try and provide all of the different pieces we can to help them. So,
Sure. Sure.
yeah.
So speaking of brew houses, there's different ways to get heat to those things. I'm on a steam system right
Oh, yeah.
now.
Yeah.
My last two places were steam. I've done direct fire. I'm trying to think if I don't think I've ever worked on a fully
An
electric
electric.
system.
Okay.
What does Blichmann offer as far as those
Yeah.
those different offerings go, and what are some of the pros and cons?
Yeah. So our biggest one is electric. So part of that depends on size.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what we've run into, so, I remember the first steam system we ever made. We dealt with a guy, he was out in California. They've got a lot of different rules and regulations out there. So after he buys his brew house and his tanks, he then has to get his steam condenser.
Mm-hmm.
And we had talked about, or sorry, not steam condenser, his boiler. And when we had talked about the boiler in advance, and they had very specific restrictions around what type of boiler he had
Sure
to
they do,
install.
yeah.
The manufacturers have very specific boilers for California. Well, that boiler ended up being, I think it was 40, 50 grand. And this was, if I'm not mistaken, this was about a 10-barrel brew house, Adam.
Okay.
So he's spending $40,000 to $50,000 on his boiler.
Mhm.
Well, then he's got to get somebody to come out and install it. And because, again, he was out in California and there's so many restrictions out there, they were going to charge him 60 grand to install the boiler.
Uh-huh.
So now here we're selling him this brew house, and the whole brew house is like $100,000, and then it's going to be $110,000 just to get the equipment to heat it. And then you've got and I don't mean to, steam is an incredible option, man.
Sure.
If you've got the right size. And so I think that's where a lot of it comes down to. At a 3.5 level, a gas or electric makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
It's just quick, it's simple. And as you get bigger, so we offer electric up to 7-barrel. And once you jump up to 10, I mean, we can do a hot liquor tank 10 or 15, and that's fine. But really on the boil side, you're going to want gas or steam.
Sure.
It's just going to heat quicker. The amount of power you have to pull in. Now, I know there's some 20-barrel electric systems out there, and you can get much larger with electric. But I think it really heavily depends on the size. And
Sure.
so what we found is we really like electric in those smaller sizes. Hook it in, turn it on. There's not a lot of maintenance to that other than cleaning the elements.
Mm.
So one of the things we've got into recently, the market is changing. Like, first of all, there's a lot of breweries that are going under right now. So there's
Sure.
a lot of used equipment out there. So we talk to a lot of customers who find used pieces here and there, and that helps them fill out their brewery. Now on the homebrew side, what we're finding is there aren't as many people coming into the industry. So there's not, when you look at homebrew clubs, we've got a cool brewing ambassador program right now where we talk to homebrew clubs all over the U.S. I cannot say enough how cool that is to talk to people all over the place. Just different experiences with their equipment, with their homebrew clubs, but they don't have a lot of new people coming into the industry.
Mhm.
And so when we talk about that from an equipment standpoint, well, what do you need? When John started this, nobody else was making stainless steel conicals.
Sure.
So it was a no-brainer. That was his first product, and he kind of built up from there. Well, now all of a sudden, we're at a stage where a lot of the pro brewing equipment has trickled down to home brewing. And so you can get most everything you need. And on the pro side, I mean, if you look at truly innovating something new on the pro side, Adam, what do you see? If you go out, and I don't know how old the 30 barrel is at Sonder, but if you were to go out and buy a 30 barrel new today, how different is it than that system? Or the specific mechanical system you were on before? Like, how truly different is that system?
Sure.
It doesn't seem like your brew day is not cut in half.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
it takes is pretty standard.
Yeah.
So what we've been looking at is ways to kind of, how can we help on that regard?
Mhm.
So one of them is our smaller electric systems, 3.5. We're starting to do what we call our surface heating element. We just
Yeah.
released it on the homebrew side, and we're getting ready to release it on our 3.5 barrel. And the whole idea is to take that heating element. So right now, when you brew, you've got a tri-clamp heating element, 3 of them actually, that you've got to take out of that kettle. We recommend every
And they're
single brew
big,
day.
and they're big, just
Yep.
like those big
Got a couple
loops.
coils.
Yeah. Yep.
And I mean, on the 3.5, they're not too bad. I mean, we're talking, well, you can see my hands on the screen.
Sure.
These are man inches here, but so man inches, you're talking about 20 inches, 24 inches, somewhere in there on the 3.5. You start getting 7 barrel, and all of a sudden, this is over a 4-foot heating element.
Yeah.
All of that rests on this one tri-clamp, so it's tough to hold it in there at the right angle, get that tri-clamp slapped on there. That becomes a little difficult. But the problem is you've got to take those out every single brew day. And there's a lot of guys that soak them. And you can CIP. We've got guys that'll CIP and then turn them 90 degrees, do it again and run it a couple times and just keep turning those elements, try and get all the different sides cleaned.
Sure.
A lot of different ways you can attack that. But basically with our new system, what we're going for is get them out of there.
Sure.
If the heating element doesn't have to touch your beer, you don't have to clean it. And so that's kind of our goal, both home and pro. As you see new equipment coming out on the Blichmann side, we're trying to focus on your brew day. What can we do to make your brew day better? And I don't mean necessarily just the hot side or the cold side or any one specific thing. It's just look at the experience. What's your least favorite part of brewing? It's usually cleaning.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Nobody gets up in the morning like, can't wait to go in and clean those tanks, man. It's the unsung part of the industry, Well, if you're not good at it, it's going to kill you.
Sure. And people that have dealt with electrical, or not electrical, with heating elements before know how difficult they are to maintain.
Yeah.
And it seems like you know somebody that's burnt one out, or I know somebody that had one in a hot liquor tank, and they didn't refill the hot liquor tank, or something malfunctioned with the refill on the hot liquor tank. And then they burn out their coil, you know what I mean? Things like that. So they can work and everything like that, but there's definitely a maintenance element to keeping them up, So that's interesting. So this surface heating element now, how does that function on these 3.5 barrel systems?
So we've actually mounted it to the bottom of the kettles. And so when you heat, it's just going to heat almost like you're putting a pot on the stove, really. Or for instance, all-in-ones on the homebrewing side are just going crazy these days, right? Well, those all-in-ones all have the heat built into the bottom. So it's the same principle. We're just moving that up. And then one of the key elements, especially for a 3.5, that you'll see trickle down to some other things too, but we want to make it removable. We find that a lot of people too have had experiences. So you talk about people who brew electric. They scorch their beer. You've heard people doing that. They're not fun to clean. You have heating elements that go bad over time. And what we see is most of the time when they go bad, it's something with the connections, or they're not cleaning them. And then over time, they start pitting and you start having problems. And that's what leads to that element going bad.
Sure.
Well, when you remove it from contact with really anything at that point, it's just in the bottom. How often does the heating element in your stove go bad? You know, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's a whole different environment there.
Sure.
The connections, you're not moving that element around, so you're not straining any of the connection points.
Hmm.
You don't have to worry about the cleaning aspect. Um, so the other interesting thing that we found digging into elements, this is something you don't talk about, but when you discuss scorching your beer, it's because of the watt density inside that element. And so watt density is, say you've got a 12,000 watt heater, right?
Hmm.
Which is what we use on our 7 barrel. And if we made it the same length as a 3.5, you're going to be pushing, off the top of my head, and this is a guess. So nobody hold me to this, but
Sure.
uh,
Sure.
you're going to be throwing like 120 watts per square inch. And that's kind of how they measure watt density is per square inch, right?
Hmm.
And so what you want is as low as possible. Um, so on our 3.5 and almost all of our heating elements, we try and run, I think around 40 watts per square inch is kind of our bar.
Okay.
That's where we want to be. And if we can stay under that, we know we're not going to have scorching problems
Mhm.
ever. Like we just really don't have that issue. If you're keeping those elements clean, you're not going to have a problem. And so that became a little more challenging when we moved those elements under the kettle because you only have so much surface area under there to work.
Mhm.
So we've done a lot of testing and had to feel that out. But I think at the end of the day, what you're going to find is we're taking some of the pain points of the electric out of that system. So
Mhm.
now you turn it on, you run your CIP, the bottom's going to be nice and clean. You want to hit it with a brush real quick, that's great. But you're not going to have to spend a ton of time cleaning your elements, taking them out, putting them in, that kind of thing. So we're really excited about that, man. And I think that's goes back to talking through with our customers. What do they want? What do they need?
Sure.
You're on a new 30 barrel. What's
Yeah.
your least favorite part of your brew day, man?
Well, right now I feel like yeah, getting things uh it's the little things. It's getting things moved from one place to another, getting things clean and everything like that, And then I have the added of, learning the new stuff. The automated end of it. Yeah. So anything, anything that simplifies
Yeah.
is definitely a-okay in my book.
Man, the automation is super cool
Mhm.
as
Mhm.
long as it all works every single time,
Absolutely.
you know?
Chase is my boss over there,
Mhm.
and he was saying the other day, because really everything is automated in house, and so um, we had an issue with the air compressor, and so basically, like none of us could do anything. I was
Right.
brewing. We had a guy running the keg washer, and that's a steam sterilizing keg washer. We had somebody canning as well. So like everything was going on. And the air knocked off, and next thing you know, you can't do anything. And Chase was saying, like the boiler is like the circulatory system, and the air compressor is like the nervous system. You need
Yeah.
you need both of those things going, otherwise things just don't work. And
Absolutely.
it's really true. It's really true. Um, well, man, that's really interesting. Um, I did have a listener, Razor. I met him
Yeah.
before last year at the Ohio Craft Brewers Conference. Nice dude. He asked me a question over on Instagram, and he said, "What are some of your favorite funny stories slash mishaps in the brew house?" And we'll keep this on the safety side of things. Because obviously, we talk all the time
Oh,
on
man.
here about safety and everything like that. But I had my most recent mishap happen today. And so, with this new automated system that I'm working on, we have the kettle full. So we're mash tun, lauter tun, kettle. Okay. So when we have the kettle full and we're brewing 2 times in a day, so we get the mash tun full again, we transfer
Yeah.
it over to the lauter tun. Mash tun is now empty, so we get that cleaned out real quick, and then we can start running wort into that to start heating that for the second beer for the second batch of the day, right? So there's some shenanigans that you have to kind of rig the system with the automation in order to send it to the mash tun rather than sending it to the kettle. And I have to hit this advance button on the screen, and the screen works well. I mean, it works well, but sometimes it's not the most sensitive. So
Right.
I went to hit the advance
Uh,
button, and it looked like the cursor like didn't quite hit it, so I hit it again, and
turn it off.
No, well, I advanced it twice, and when I advance it twice, what that does is it opens up the drain on that
Oh,
tank. And
oh.
so I'm dumping first wort. So like the richest wort that I'm going to make, I'm dumping that down the drain. And I was smart enough to know that that's what I did. So I knew it was bad. All right. So I was smart enough to know it was bad, dumb enough not to do it. Not to stop me from doing it. But anyways, yes, I did miss some gravity today on that, but that was just me being familiar with the functionality of that screen. Is there anything like that? Anything funny on the brew house side that you've seen happen over the years?
Man, I mean, I know there's been some funny stuff. None of it's coming top to mind. I will say this will be a different part of the brew day that was funny. Okay,
Okay,
maybe
yeah,
not the actual brewing.
sure.
So we actually had a local brewery, and it was one of our larger systems. So it was a 7 barrel, a little more automation. He actually got his finger stuck in the mash rake, man, and it
Oh
kind of pulled the end of that sucker off. And so
no,
I was at work on a Friday. I get a call from one of the other owners, and he's like, "Hey, Drew, how do I turn this thing off?"
no.
And I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, what do you want to turn it off for?" He's like, "Well, our brewer got his finger stuck in there. He's at the hospital." I'm like, "Well, that's not good,
Okay,
man. That's not good."
time out real quick. I laugh at inappropriate things.
It's,
All
it,
right, so this is
you know, and the part of it was too, like, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was his grandma or somebody was in poor health, and he was in a hurry to get through the brew day and get to the hospital, and
sure,
so
sure.
he was rushing through it. Obviously, you got to turn that rake off before you start reaching in
Yeah,
there.
man. Yeah,
He was trying to eject the grain, and so he's trying to lower that piece down on the
sure.
fly while it was moving,
Ah,
and I get how it happens, man. You work with equipment every day, you get pretty comfortable with it too, and sometimes
yeah,
we take that for granted. Um,
yeah.
but I will say what ended up happening was I called a couple of the other local brewers. I was again back when grab beers with them every Friday.
Sure.
They met me over there, and we ended up finishing out the brew day. But
Ah.
the fun part, he did get the finger attached. He's doing well. He's got some feeling in it. So happy ending there. But I will say the fun part was trying to name that beer, man. We came up with some heller good names, and that had to be the most fun brew day I've ever been a part of. So, I mean, they brought us dinner, and we're all drinking beer because, again, it was a Friday. Luckily, we normally just drink beer in the afternoons anyway at that point. But yeah, they ended up naming the beer Pinky in the Grain.
There
Um,
you go.
I know
There you go.
just the tip was a popular one that was thrown out there, and what else? I mean, we had
That
all
starts.
kinds of things,
It
man.
starts.
It was slippery slope real quick.
Yeah, yeah,
Man.
yeah. Things can go downhill in a hurry
But
when a couple of beers have been had. You never quite
oh
know where
yeah.
the naming structures are gonna go.
But that brew day was a blast, and it was cool. You get together for collabs, right?
Sure,
Watching
sure,
different brewers. So we're on a brew house.
sure,
I'm comfortable with it. I'm familiar with it. But the other two guys, one was on a 5 barrel. He did have a mash rake. The other one was on a 3.5, no mash rake. So those guys came together, and it's like, well, here's how I do it. Well, here's how I do it. And so we're talking through this, trying to figure out what's going on. What chemicals does he have? How are we going to clean the tank to move it over? What's
sure.
his hop schedule? Again, we're in the middle of the boil at this point when we got there, and so. It was a lot of fun trying to figure things out and know where to go. But that was probably the most fun I've ever had on a brew day by
Sure,
far. Yeah.
sure.
Not great circumstances, but a lot of fun.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, just a couple of clarification questions
Yeah.
that I had from the chat. There
Mhm.
was talking about the mill that you guys offer on the pro side. Is
Yeah.
that something that has like a standalone motor on it?
So, standalone motor. So basically
So,
the
like,
motor bolts to the side. So we've got
no,
when you
okay. So
buy
what
it.
I'm saying is basically this is not the pro side mill that you have. You are not
Mhm.
attaching a drill to, correct?
No, 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 no.
Okay,
It's
good.
motorized.
And so
Yeah.
I wanted to make that clear because this isn't like the monster mill or like this is
No.
not homebrew side. This is actually something that you could be using on a nano size type thing.
Yeah, we built it for that. So again, when we go back to when I started in pro talking to those customers, a mill was something I got a question on all the time, Adam. And it was like,
Sure.
where do I go with this? So I talked to a lot of the suppliers out there. Man, there's some awesome mills. Like I'm trying, well, I won't start dropping manufacturers' names. There's plenty of them
Sure.
out there, but dealt
Sure.
with a lot of them. But the problem was, you're going to jump up to at the time, I think it was around $7,500 to $10,000 for a mill.
Yeah.
And you're either using the homebrew stuff or you're jumping up to a $10,000 mill. And
Yep.
there just wasn't a happy medium in between. A lot of those smaller homebrew mills you're using a drill on.
Yep.
And so we wanted at the time to come out with a mill that was kind of in between, that, a 2-barrel, a 3.5, even a 5-barrel brew house,
Sure.
that size could use. And so that's what we made. We knew we could make a slightly smaller one that would appeal to home brewers, but we came in, I believe our mill's around $1,000.
Yep.
And the whole purpose of that was just, this is for use in a brewery. This is
Sure.
going to hold up. I mean, we had somebody the other day, what did he tell us? He ran, I'm trying to remember. He had run 40,000 pounds of grain through his mill, something
Nice.
like that. And so,
Nice.
yeah, I was trying to remember something eventually on the mill, one of the felt washers or something had to be replaced, something small. And it was like,
Sure.
man, that's a lot of grain put through that mill, man. But they're built to stand up. So
Sure.
we made them for brew pubs. And I know some of our homebrew customers kind of got aggravated with us. Hey, that price point's too high. We can't afford that. But
Sure.
that really wasn't our target market. We were trying to make something for those smaller brew pubs.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. There's another question from Andrew asking, how many amps is a 7-barrel electric?
So it depends on your voltage. So a lot of times when you hop up to 7-barrel, so each element, I believe, is 12,000 watts. There's 3 per kettle. So you're talking 36,000 watts per kettle. That's a lot of power. And so typically when we see people go that big, you want to jump up in voltage. The higher the volts, the lower the amperage. Okay. So those are directly related. So a lot of people have like 240-volt single phase. You're really not going to do that on a 7-barrel. 3-phase inherently has lower amperage. And then if you jump up to like a 480-volt, that has even lower amperage yet. Okay. So a 3-phase 7-barrel, man, he's testing me.
No,
it's
you
good.
Don't have that.
It's been a while since I've had to look at it. I was trying to think. So our 3-phase is even different. I've got a calculator on my phone. I usually calculate my amperage. Yeah, if you're 3-phase on a 7-barrel, somebody's gonna jump in there and help me out. Nope, they're not. All right. Let me think about that one for a minute. Let me think about that one, or I'll just put it in my phone.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine, man. You're good. Well, listen. Goodness. I wanted to thank you for coming on. This is, for just on a personal side, I started working with you guys. I'm trying to think how many months it is. Hold on, I'm gonna cough again. Let me mute my. I'm trying to think. I think it had to have been over 6 months since we have partnered up. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting, you mentioned before that, Blichmann is about serving people, relationships, and working with the right types of folks. And the thing that I was really impressed with was what you had mentioned, family. And sometimes I think people can throw things around like that, and it can kind of end up sounding trite. But my experience of working with Blichmann has been absolutely that. When I went out to visit the team, tons of great folks, but then really, I mean, the proof is ultimately, and when we were talking about the leadership stuff before, you can always say a lot of things, but it actually, I'm much more of a show me guy than a tell me guy, and it's just been, Blichmann has always been show me people. You say it with the words, but then you see it in the actions as well. And so it's just from a personal standpoint to be able to add a sponsor like this early for me. This channel is a side hustle. It's something that I've got a lot of kids to be raising here. And listen, I am passionate about it. I love the educational side, sharing information, getting to know new people. But it's one of those things. Working with Blichmann has been really, really tremendous on so many levels. And so I just wanted to thank you guys for all of that. The whole team over there has always been so good. And just kind of as a wrap up, is there anything else that you want to let us know that's going on with Blichmann in the future that we should be looking out for?
You know, yes, there is one thing. I did want to speak to what you just said for just a second, and I will say this. You know, I said when I came there, John kind of empowered us, and it was something that really, um, I guess I haven't lost sight of, if that makes sense. But when I started in you know, we've got three little ones now. So when I started, I said I had just one. He was a couple months old, and our first two were 12 months and 12 days apart. And all of a sudden, they're in daycare every day, Adam. I'm sure you were there at one time. They're getting sick all the time, going to have to take care of kids. We continue that today. It's, you know, your family comes first. And what you'll find there is from all the employees, we don't have a lot of turnover. I mean, most of the people there started out in the shop and have worked their way up. They've been there for years. We call it our family, you know, and, you know, I've been at other places that say it, but I didn't feel that way, if that makes sense, you know, but there, we really feel like a family, man. And we want to take care of people. And so then we say that in some of our advertising. You know, we'll say to our customers, you're part of the Blichmann family. We'll do what we can to take care of you. You know, it comes with an understanding I can't always do something, but if I can, I'm always going to try and help. And so it's been really cool to work there, man. Really cool.
Excellent.
For what that's worth. So looking forward, I know Jen would be really mad if I didn't bring this up. So Jen, this one's for you, but we're going to be running some holiday sales. So kind of along that same line. So, you know, the supply chain's been crazy over the last few years. And there for a while, it took, you know, 6 to 9 months to get equipment in. And it was back and forth after COVID. And, you know, the supply chain's really quickened up now, which is awesome. And we've got equipment in and we're able to get it in pretty quickly. So what we've seen, you know, we're going into holidays. The economy's changed over the last couple of years. The market's changed. Money's tight for people, man. It just is. Money seems to be a lot tighter. So we decided that we're going to start actually this week, and we're going to start running sales on different equipment every week through the end of the year.
Nice.
And so we know that holiday times, people want to get new equipment. There's people trying to buy equipment for hobbyists or other people. And so we're going to try and help out and run some sales to let people get in there and get some equipment that they want. So, yeah, so we're really excited to announce a sale. I don't know. We have never run a sale like this, and I'm not sure I've seen other equipment manufacturers do anything quite like this, but every single week we will be announcing a new sale through the end of the year.
Nice.
So we're pretty pumped, man.
Blackwood Brews was saying hopefully there will be a sale on that compact surface. Do you know if there's going to be anything as far as that goes? You don't have to have specifics.
Well, I can't say.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Stay tuned. Well, so first of all, how can people stay in touch on this stuff?
Oh, yeah. So jump on our email list. So, you know, when you go to our website, it asks if you want to join the email list. Jump on that list. We send those out right away. That way everybody stays in tune with kind of what's going on when we run those sales. I think today we started our fire and ice sale. So we've got burners and then heat exchangers for sale. Nice. So pretty excited about that. I think 30% off is what we're looking at. Nice. But we're trying to do worthwhile sales. I don't know that there's a sale that's less than like 20%, man. So some of those are up to 50%. I feel like there might have even been some products that we'd had for a little bit. We were looking at maybe a 75% type deal. We did that on our G4, some scratch and dents recently. And then, man, the people that got them were like, I can't even find a scratch or a dent on this thing. Hey, we try and stand by our equipment. So if I'm selling something to you at full price, I want to make sure that when you get it, it looks great. You don't question why I got this, or man, this isn't what I thought. We want to send good stuff out the door. And so if we see a little ding or a little scratch or something, you know, gives us pause in any way, then we're going to hold that back and we'll sell it as a scratch and dent. So anyway, look for some good deals, man. We're pretty excited.
Yeah, and definitely give a follow on Blichmann Engineering on Instagram and Facebook as well, so you can stay up on those as well. And do jump on that, jump on the website and sign up for the newsletter as well. Well, Drew, man, I have to tell you, it was just a pleasure chatting with you. I'm glad you made the time, and I'm glad that we're able to kind of talk get some range in the conversation. And kind of give people a better idea of what you guys have going on. And so
I appreciate
was
you
a lot
having
of
me
fun.
on here, man. This was fun.
Definitely.
We've run across each other a few times and been in a couple meetings or lunch, and
Sure.
but I don't know that we've got to spend a lot of time just sitting down and talking, man. I enjoy it.
Heck yeah, man. That was
Yeah, thanks for
awesome.
having me on. Appreciate it, man.
Definitely. And hold on once I jump offline and we can chat real quick. But
Yeah,
everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. Once
thanks, guys.
again, give a follow over to the YouTube page, give the thumbs up, the comments, all those things. Check me out on Instagram, all that stuff, so you stay up on the most recent. And please give some love to Blichmann. For those of you that are looking to get some new equipment, whether it be on the home or pro side, please check out what they have to offer. So, all right, everybody, have a great weekday, what have you. And keep an eye on Instagram. I'll be putting up the November live stream info and stuff like that as we go. Well, in the meantime, have a great day. Bye.
Thanks, guys.